It's the 17th day of October. Ooh, it's 2024. All the crazies are at it again. I'm Dana. I hope you're doing well. On the eve of an apocalypse between Iran and Israel. You can call in for these shows. By the way, it's 7:09. We're in Canada. 589-4406. I encourage the nuclear industry to leave me alone. I am not a threat. I only have 3 viewers. Leave me be. We'll get there at some point. You can call in at 709-589-4406. My apologies to anybody out there with who has seizures. We're doing another time machine show. And we got a doozy for everybody tonight. First, we're going to talk about Iran and Israel / the crazies. And probably at the beginning of every show from here on till the nuclear war starts, we'll be covering that topic. So unless Iran or somebody assassinates Benjamin Netanyahu, we're getting into a nuclear rumble. And after Fukushima, that's the last thing we need. After 80 years of nuclear industry, that's the last thing we need. There's a lot of posturing going on. And Iran has already demonstrated that they can penetrate the so-called Iron Dome. The David Sling can't stop it. Some irony there because the Israelis hate, the Zionists hate Jesus. And yet they used the David Sling as one of their great defenses. It's interesting, isn't it? So Iran had 2 volleys, which after all this time is quite amazing to show that much restraint. And they have hundreds of thousands of these very high-speed heavy artillery missiles. It's hard. We don't really get a good glimpse into what the missiles are doing. We know it's significant destructions. You can tell by the detonations from far away with the cameras we're seeing, right? And Israel claimed that none of them got through, but it looks like almost all of them got through. A few of them looked like they might have been stopped, but if you look closely at some of those, what you discover were those missiles were coming in, they kind of like ejected their cover, and then out came multiple decoys. And so the Israelis ended up targeting the decoys while a supersonic projectile missile explosive device hit its target. And you got Israel, you got the Americans, you got United Kingdom. They're nuclear. They're down there in that area. They're there to defend or to help Israel do whatever the hell it wants to do. And then Iran, of course, is pushed into a corner. It's got no choice now. It knew that was going to happen at some point. That it has no choice but to engage at some point. So they told Israel point blank that no matter what you do, we are going to strike back much harder, which the Zionist ideology is, you hit us, we hit you back harder. And so the only way they can go back harder than what's coming is going to be with nuclear. And Iran has, by the looks of it, some of the intelligence agencies analysts are saying that they have the possibility of making a nuclear weapon within 1 week. If you can do it in 1 week, they already got it done. And because everything's so deep underground, there's no one there to say yes or no. But then logic would dictate, when you look at their responses, that they actually do have them ready to go. And so the only way Israel can get at their secret nuclear program is to nuke those areas, because they're so deep underground. And there's rumors of Israel's using depleted uranium munitions in Beirut. And if you remember the depleted uranium we used in Fallujah in Iraq, the British, I think it was 86% of the babies were just lumps of flesh, completely deformed. And the congenital malformations are next level horror. And so what we got now is we got a, if you look at Orthodox Jews in Israel, they couldn't care less if everybody dies, because they get to go to their whatever their prophecy is. Let's put it that way. And so all they read is the Torah and the Talmud. They don't read anything else. They're the leeches on Israel's system on top of that, right? The millions that are there in Israel that came from all over the world. It's $50,000 to become an Israeli. You get $50,000 US dollars if you become an Israeli citizen. And a little piece of Palestinians' land, apparently. And now they're auctioning off beachfront properties in Gaza. So they're not trying to kill Hamas, right? Clearly. And then you got 7-front war going on. That's unless they surrender, and Benjamin Netanyahu, when the war is over, he goes straight to jail. And so his incentive now is never to stop the war, and is to get the biggest war of all times, the nuclear war. And so that's going to be quite the event. Now, I'll caution everybody to remember what they've done already on this planet, the nuclear wars they had. And you're saying, well, Dana, there was no such thing as nuclear war. You can't call Nagasaki, Hiroshima a nuclear war. And you're right. It was 2 nuclear weapons. But think about the nuclear wars they done to the Marshall Islands, where it was equal to a Nagasaki bomb a day for 12 years. Or what the French done to the French Polynesians, which is equal to a Nagasaki bombs. These are plutonium bombs, by the way. Was equal to a Nagasaki bomb every week for 12 years to the French Polynesians. And then think about what the British done to Christmas Island and also to Australia, to the Montebello, Maralinga, Edmonds Field. The nuclear weapons. The British used to wait for the wind, and they had something like 30 planes monitoring the wind, where they would drop these rockets out. So they knew, these smoke rockets, they knew everything about the wind patterns. And yet somehow magically they didn't detonate the bomb until the wind was blowing directly over Australia and the biggest cities on top of that. I know one of their tests in Adelaide, which was something like 1,200 miles away at the time, was 96,000 counts per minute of gamma alone. That was on the roof of the local institution there. And they didn't have betas, alphas, neutron, etc. devices to measure that stuff. But you can certainly extrapolate how bad that would have been. And then they done 700 dirty bombs on land in Australia on top of that. What they done to the Christmas Island native population was so hideous. But yet here we are, we're all on this planet, we're still on this planet. The species have been decimated because of this, and so have we, with health problems, with heart problems, liver problems, and lung, respiratory, pituitary, thyroid, adrenaline, Alzheimer's, dementia, autism, diabetes, Down syndrome, schizophrenia. And we've seen that just spike post-Fukushima with this pulse event, right? So we've been saturated. Now, a nuclear war doesn't mean we're not going to get more radiation. It doesn't mean that this is not going to be bad for the whole planet. But we've sustained an awful lot of radiation already. The Soviet Union's biggest emitter was the La Bamba, I call it, and it was 50 megatons. It was equal to 3,800 Nagasaki bombs going off at the same time. Think of two countries. Think of Israel and Iran throwing 1,900 Nagasaki bombs at each other next week. That's what it was equal to already. And the emissions covered the whole planet, of course. And this is why you see all kinds of health issues on top of all the other things they're throwing at this poor planet. The military-industrial complex, it provides weapons everywhere worldwide, basically. So you can blame America, you can blame Israel and Iran, and you'll be right, but you've got to blame the military-industrial complex and the investors in the stock market that makes it possible for them to do the things they're doing. I'm not worried about the extra radioactive fallout like the average person would. I'm terrified of it. I'm heartbroken by it, don't get me wrong. But because of what we've already experienced on this planet, now, you know the expression, never waste a crisis. Right? Rahm Emanuel, after, he was the former mayor of Chicago, was it, I believe? But anyway, never waste a crisis is the equivalent of a false flag. So when we talk about Iran and Israel, I'm going to take you back in the time machine, and then we're going to jump into the news cycle. But I got one video that I had put together that asks the question. At that time was Patrick Clausen at the Washington Institute, a think tank. And Patrick Clausen was basically explaining how we got into most wars, so you can expect the same thing from Iran or Israel pre-election in the United States. A false flag event, which would get the Americans and the Canadians and the French and the British and the Australian, New Zealand population to back up a war, right? They need a catalyst. And Patrick Clausen, in this video, will tell you it's very difficult to see how this president will get us to war with Iran. So he's talking about a previous administration. But his words are applicable to every administration. It's very difficult, as he will explain to you, and I put the pictures in to help articulate. It's very difficult to see how the current administration can get us to war with Iran. So it'll be best if somebody else starts the war with Iran. So listen to it yourself. I'll adjust the volume for you in real time here.
I frankly think that crisis initiation is really tough. And it's very hard for me to see how the United States president can get us to war with Iran. Some people might think Mr. Wilson wanted to get us into World War I. You may recall he had to wait for the Lusitania episode. Some people might think that Mr. Johnson wanted to send troops to Vietnam. You may recall he had to wait for the Gulf of Tonkin episode. We didn't go to war with Spain until the until the Maine exploded. And may I point out that Mr. Lincoln did not feel he could call out the Federal Army until Fort Sumter was attacked, which is why he ordered the commander at Fort Sumter to do exactly that thing which the South Carolinians had said would cause an attack. Some people might think that Mr. Roosevelt wanted to get us into World War II, as David mentioned. You may recall we had to wait for Pearl Harbor. So if, in fact, the Iranians aren't going to compromise, it would be best if somebody else started the war.
I apologize if that was a little bit loud. I didn't put the headphones on. It would be best if somebody else started the war. They need a war. They need a nuclear war to cover up what Fukushima done on top of that. Let's talk about Fukushima. We got a poll for everybody tonight. Somewhere. must have clicked that. There we go. Did nuclear scientists use nuclear power as an extermination machine against all species on purpose? And clearly this is what happens. The nuclear scientist, the scariest creature in the universe. Sneakiest one too. He'll kill every species and they won't even see it coming because you can't smell or see or feel or touch or taste or perceive radioactive fallout. That's your enemy. The current focus of concern in Japan now is the pools at the reactors where the spent fuel is stored. So at the top of this building, about 140 feet above it is where the fuel pools are too. That's reactor 3. It's not like the other reactors. This is a plutonium spent fuel reactor. Clearly, every academic on the planet that's seen that, and every journalist included, that seen that building knew the fuel pools were gone. Some of the spent fuel is still very radioactive. You gotta admire them, though. It takes balls to tell that big of a lie, I guess. Because the way they're framing the narrative is, it could be, maybe, could be, maybe could not. But the reality of it is, it was ejected right out of the building. It's equal to around 800 Chernobyls. There was 9 reactor cores in this plutonium mixed oxide fuel reactor. And they're massive compared to Chernobyl. Chernobyl is a graphite. These are pure uranium, pure plutonium. And number 3 reactor was the reclaimed uranium plutonium from previous fuel. So this was insidious stuff. And radioactive fallout, by the way, is 2 billion times more toxic than industrial poison. If the spent fuel rods get too hot, they can suffer damage. Let's go back and check the date of this puppy. March the 19th. So March the 19th, that's what reactor 3 looked like. And this week we've covered mostly stories from around March the 19th, haven't we? And all of them are covering every facet of that site. It's really interesting. So this whole week was a special shows because you really get an insight into the enormity of the cover-up. And then slowly over the last 13 years, they condensed it, right? The cover-up story, refined it. But it's basically the same story, isn't it? So this is day 8 in 2011. If the spent fuel rods get too hot, they can suffer damage, release significant amounts. That's the gallows laugh, because you'll figure it out if you've never seen this stuff before. In a little while, it'll make sense for you. It's the gallows laugh, is not. Significant amount of radioactive gases into the atmosphere could eventually catch fire. The minute that you're releasing radiation from the fuel rods in this context is because it's melting down. It's on fire. And so the journalist's job is to sell you the most hideous lies imaginable. And then the majority of them don't write the articles, right? The academics and the International Atomic Energy Agency, whoever is the public relation firm, which is typically IAEA, obviously, and the Nuclear Regulatory Agency gets their marching orders from the UN, which is a military-industrial complex. Since several of the reactor buildings that surround these pools have been damaged by explosions, the radioactivity releases from the pools in those buildings would get directly into the atmosphere. Well, let's have a look at what they looked like originally. What's the possibility anything got out of those buildings? Now, officially, nothing got out of the buildings as of August 24th last year, the new public relations story. And clearly, when you look at that story, it's orchestrated by the International Atomic Energy Agency. And then it's implemented worldwide. Every university, every media worldwide regurgitated those narratives magically. That only tritium was escaped and that was captured in 1,000 tanks, right? That's something we haven't covered this week. Let's just touch up on that because that's a little bit important. Just a whole lot, little bit. But we got a neat way of talking about that. So let's touch on that. So officially there's 1,000 tanks. And each tank is around 300,000 gallons. Oh, let me do this again. I'm going a bit the hard way. Sometimes if I don't do a subject for a few weeks, my brain runs out of space and recycles. Because your brain can only hold so much information, and we cover all of it every week. It's madness. So we got short versions, long versions. Let's cover the tanks. And then let's cover the other stuff. All right, here we go. Almost. Just bear with me. I just gotta go click a couple more times. We're almost there. So first off, all the tanks were built in 2013. Mary Yamaguchi seems to be the cover story with the CIA, the Associated Press, and Reuters are clearly CIA operations. August the 20th, 2013 had 8,000 tanks. It's quite interesting that they built 1,000 tanks. And then today, guess how many tanks they got today? Oh yeah, that's right, 1,000 tanks, Dana. In 2014, they had 1,200. And in 2017, was 900 large tanks. Try walking with both of your feet flat on the ground. Only a homeless person would pose like that, right? You know what I mean? Because that's who's at this site. These tanks are empty. On top of that, you can call in if you got some input. These tanks are empty because of the numbers we're talking about. Pouring water over a reactor core is the official story. It's multiple sieverts per liter. It's at least 1.4 million beta, not counting alphas, neutrons, and gammas, would be in each tank. 1.4 million sieverts. 3 sieverts is a lethal dose. And the tanks, even if they were 6 feet thick, lead still couldn't shield this person right there, if they actually are there. They're probably a homeless person, or it's photoshopped in for some reason. And I assure you, the industry has done their share of that. 2019, tritium, of course, in the third line right here at the beginning, 1,000 tanks. 2021, 1,000 tanks. 2023, Mary Yamaguchi. That third line from the bottom, 1,000 tanks. 2023, Mary Yamaguchi. So let's go back to 2014. The Advanced Liquid Processing Systems, ALPS, has yet to function reliably. And in 2013, they were building it. Late 2013, they started to build it. And so normally the reactors need 4,500 tons a minute, needs 1 million gallons a minute, 1,440 minutes a day. It's enough to fill all the tanks 6 times a day. In 2014, Areva, which is basically exact same setup as the ALPS system, which is water filtration system, but you can't filter the water. The filter is way too radioactive in 20 minutes to ever get near it again. And because this is the way science works, they can tell you whatever lie they want, but science clearly says they're lying. The groundwater bypass operation had no effect. They failed to deliver on a promise to install a fence because they said it was going to cost $1 billion, but you can't build a fence to stop radiation and nuclear meltdowns. It needs a bottom. It needs a top. It can't be done. Anyway, because of the particular properties, you have to vent everything. The ice wall not only wasn't not meeting the expectations, it simply didn't work. And they said there was 260,000 people worked on the wall. 260,000, I believe the number was. And then when you took the numbers that they used for the whole project, and you gave everybody $1,100, there was nothing left to build a wall. And why would you cycle in 260,000 people? Who are these people? What'd you do with all those paper suits? That's a joke, by the way. Paper suits can't protect you. We bugged them so much over the paper suits 7 or 8 years ago that they actually came out with a story saying they burned 7,000 paper suits a day in the incinerators at the site just to shut me up. So they flew over it at 1,000 feet above the ground, the whole area, at 3 million becquerels per square meter of iodine-131, 20 kilometers from the disease factory. And iodine-131, of course, was used to manipulate everybody's nasty isotope, don't get me wrong, and the damage is forever. And by the way, there was 10 times more 132 and 30 times more 133 for every iodine-131 produced. And they're 9 times more efficient at ionizing and radiating the thyroid gland than the monstrous 131. There was the series system, water filtration system. And so the problem with all these filtration systems, Nucurion system, is you're talking about filtering 1,000 isotopes, and you're talking about the minute that you get a couple of grams of it together, because you can't just filter out one, right? They're all the same size. And so if you're going to filter, you're filtering everything. So you're going to have a criticality in the filter on top of that. You're going to have a nuclear meltdown, a chain reaction. It can't be done, right? It's strictly show and tell to lull you into complacency. And if the truth is that the fact they got 1,000 tanks probably, we counted them. We only counted 750, by the way. And most of them were small ones. But if you filled up one of those tanks, you can't build another tank within a square mile of it because of the gamma shines, the neutron bombardments, the beta rays, the alphas, the X. You know, and all this stuff settles on the bottom because you're pouring water over the fuel. You got wells drilled around the water's running towards the ocean. You're pumping it up viciously all day long. They said there were 6,000 people doing this every day. It's not me. This is them. I'm only telling you their story, and we've been doing that all week. On top of that, we're showing it to you, and we do that constantly. We provide you the documentation so that you can see the difference, what they're trying to tell you, and what's really going on. And then you're a weapon against this industry, whether you realize it or not. And if you watched all these shows this week, nobody on this planet can beat you in a debate. If you've been watching this show for a long time, you might not realize it, or you might, and hopefully you do, but there is no one going to beat you in this narrative. And you get into an argument with 5 or 6 people, you just stay calm, and you'll win that battle 100 out of 100 times. So the problem with the filtration systems, all the atoms are the same size, it's so toxic. If you put it all together, on top of that, the gammas, the neutrons, the betas, the alpha, that's the criticality event. You can't do that. You can't separate them because they're all the same size. Everything going straight into the ocean because you'll lose control of the site. And they've had multiple earthquakes. And there was one earthquake a few years back where over 50 of the tanks had moved. If these tanks were full, they wouldn't have moved. Everything else would have moved first, and it didn't. And so that's proof those tanks were empty. Some of the tanks are filled with water. And we got many other reasons. They won't let anybody independently test the water. They won't let anybody go near the tanks. They wouldn't take help from any country. The list goes on and on. And not only that, the reactors were destroyed right away. TEPCO plans to dump the water at Fukushima directly into the Pacific. The plant had already released enormous amounts of highly contaminated water directly into the ocean, plethora of leaks. Calling these events leaks is one of the biggest crimes we've ever seen, by the way. EU Energy Commissioner calls Fukushima an apocalypse. And so it basically wiped out all the species. Almost everything is out of control. Not almost, it's out of control. And once you got a meltdown, you can't go near it. And you just got to stand back and hope something Saves your ass like a public relation firm. So 1,000 of them have been doing every day now for 13 years. France says Japan has lost control. The French should leave the country. And France, because France is not stupid. Swiss, the same thing. The Energy Commissioner says they lost. When they say almost, that's just the editorial, because it's coming from BBC. They're not going to put in the words. They have to put in almost. Nuclear report warns of an apocalyptic scenario at Fukushima in the weeks ahead, and the disaster. This could one day be considered the start of the ultimate catastrophe of the world and the planet. North Korea, that particular administration called them incompetent, which was appropriate. That's pretty polite, actually. I had some more trace words. 1,000 years from now, contaminated water from Fukushima may be still entering the Pacific Ocean. Remember, it blew up, right? And so it's hemorrhaging into the ocean from every direction. Every time it rains or a typhoon hits that country, it just pours into the Pacific. So here was some of the first
maybe
models
worse
of the
than
ocean.
thought. Studies from last year indicate that radioactive water will contaminate the entire Pacific Ocean in just 6 years. Kim Min-ji reports.
This graphic shows the gradual contamination of the Pacific Ocean due to leaks of radioactive water from the crippled Fukushima nuclear plant in Japan. The simulation, which was run by a German marine research institute, shows the entire Pacific waters being polluted by radioactive water in just 6 years.
Hang on a second. I got 114 views on my video last night. Can you imagine that? I've never seen anything like that before. The airborne plumes covers the planet. This is 10 million atoms per liter of rainfall. So you can pretend that the million atoms per square meter. A becquerel is, I consider, an atom because that's the energy from the atom. Something has to create the becquerel. And because, like, think of it this way. So you got 1 million to 10 million atoms in that study per cubic meter of air, of cesium-137, which pulses energy 600 feet every second, by the way. You got 1 million or so atoms of xenon-133. You got 20 million atoms of radioactive iodine. And you got 220 million atoms per liter of iodine-129 in the rain. So let's back that up for 1 second. So you got cesium-137, xenon-133, you got 20 million, iodine-131, iodine-129. You know, for every 131, there's 10 times more 132, 30 times more 133, 31 times more iodine-129. For every cesium-137 after the first 30 days, or 1,000 days, it's a 100 to 1 ratio or so of strontium-90s. For every cesium-137 produced, there's 100 times 100 strontium-90s produced. There's the sulfur peroxide hydrogen buckyballs. There's the krypton-85. There's many different documented radioactive fallout elements. And you can fight over one and cause a divide all you want, but you're being dishonest because you're ignoring the fact that we have the documentations of absurd numbers of unbelievably dangerous emissions that can't, because when you start adding all of these up and put them into the calculator, and then you're going to fight over one or fight over another one, you're going into their trap, right? You're missing the big picture. That we have documented studies quantifying the radioactive fallout of all these different isotopes, and this is just a fraction of them that are documented. This happened, period. And what we know about, then The ones we can find are then used mathematically in an equation to extrapolate the other 1,000 isotopes. So when you see huge numbers, right, 1 million, 10 million atoms of cesium-137, which pulses energy almost at the speed of light, 600 feet every second. You got 1 million xenon-133. You got a 20 million iodine-131, 220 million iodines-129. You had lots of studies on the sulfur peroxide, hydrogen, buckyballs, which were all hot particles. And so when you start looking at what the plume really, and they were all in that same plume. It's not like you had a plume of this and then a plume of that coming through. This is one plume, and they're all in that same plume. This is what they found in the cubic meter or the liter. And the war in Iran and the nuclear war that's coming up the next few weeks with Iran and Israel is not going to produce that kind of radioactive fallout, because the inventories in Japan were extraordinary, right? You had 4 decades of reactor cores stored at the top of each of the 4 buildings, and that inventory was released into the environment. But it's still going to make plumes covering the planet. It's still going to be terrible. You're still going to have to try to mitigate it. It's still going to contaminate your water, your food, and everything else. I'm not saying that it's not going to do that. I'm just saying we lived through events now that has been worse than what we're... Now, the war itself is ugly, right? You know, nuclear war, they're going for the kill, and this might never stop. This might be the beginning of the next chapter in humanity, where we're already facing an extinction event. So I went out and done research expeditions after Fukushima, because Fukushima really did happen, as I just showed it to you. And remember, they came out and showed you that model over there and said it was the radioactive fallout from NOAA, when this was NOAA's radioactive emissions into the ocean. But the oceans were late compared to the way the planet was covered. And 80 years of these emissions is global warming. 80 years, because this stuff never goes away. It's assimilated in all your pollen, all your trees, plants, all your creatures, and all your species. But it still pulses energy almost at the speed of light every second. It's saturated from the top of the troposphere to the bottom of the ocean. And there was an enormous amount of it. And they didn't pretend they were in the building because it's like a banana and a potato chip and walking in the sunshine, right? So I launched research expeditions for 6 years from Vancouver, British Columbia to Alaska. And it's 27,000 islands. And I went up there and meandered through that for 6 years.
We got the big one up.
And we hit it in every direction you can imagine. It's hard to appreciate it, but we hit this to quantify that this was real the first year, and then the following years to document if there was a recovery. And so this is what your species should look like to your left in the British Columbia, Alaska, California coastlines included have all been completely wiped out. And we know this because we went back year after year. Now, typically when you took a glass of water to the ocean, it had 1 billion creatures in it. And they were the eggs and larvae and etc. of the species, the 7,000 visible species, for instance, plus all the sea creatures and everything else. And it's a true super life. So around 900,000 of each glass of water was life, right? The eggs and larvae and everything else. And then the other 100 million species, 900 million, the other 100 million species were the phytoplankton, the basis of the food chain, the oxygen chain, the carbon sequestering chain. But if you plowed in that coastline, the species on both sides would fill in the gap. It wouldn't be symmetrically naked on top of that for the whole coastline, because the species would come up from deeper and they would just fill in the gap. Those species to your left are exterminated. And we went back 5 more years. And these were the most difficult times of my life trying to accomplish this. And I understood that it had to be done to quantify it. And then once hopefully the species recover, but if they don't, then we have a moral obligation now to tell that story. And so the plumes, this was a Neptunium-239 plume. I can't remember if that was Krypton 85 plume. This was a plutonium plume. These are documented. These are all like 20-day plumes within 20 days, for instance. So within 20 days, so within 30 days, we have documented the Neptunian plume covering the whole planet. We documented the Krypton 85 covering the whole planet. We documented the plutonium 239 covering the whole planet. We documented the 1 million to 10 million atoms of cesium-137 covering the whole planet. It would be just as much, by the way, of cesium-134. We documented 1 million atoms per square meter of krypton or xenon-133. We documented 20 million atoms of 131. We documented 220 million atoms, which, by the way, these numbers, you're talking about saturating the thyroid glands of every species, including humans. And you're talking about every species is going to be making radioactive stem cells and radioactive hormones. So the species is very vulnerable, so they're going to disappear relatively quickly compared to us. But in us, it's going to show up in all kinds of illnesses and diseases and autoimmune deficiencies and injuries. So we have a documentation that is unassailable on top of that of the species. The species to your left didn't come back. I was a former commercial diver and dove all of this coastline for years, in both the Atlantic and the Pacific. And we see the same thing in the Atlantic. Now, the Atlantic wasn't quite as highly visible as this, but all the other markers are gone. The tidal zones are naked. If you're looking for seagulls, you have to go at low tide. You have to go to McDonald's. The migratory birds haven't showed up now for 4 years. And this is the biggest run on the planet, 46 million. The food chain is broken in both oceans. We can confirm it. And this is why they're pretending they're in a building that don't exist. And we are here beating the drums to try to educate the population and warn humanity. Originally, we felt scientists, academics would take the information and raise the alarm, right? And boy, were we wrong. My goodness. My, oh my, were we ever stupid? Were we ever gullible? Were we ever naive to think that they didn't know and that they cared? We were completely naive. This is the top journalists from CBS America, BBC, United Kingdom, ABC, Australia, and CNN, of course, is everywhere. And they're just a fraction of the media that came in and pretended they were in a building that don't exist. They done that because Fukushima is an extinction event. But a war in Iran and Israel would be a pretty cool way to keep nuclear head above the water. Everybody should try to jump on their head, of course. So we're going back to that story. Similar fuel damage within the reactor cores would be surrounded by the reactor's primary containment so that a much smaller fraction would get out unless there was a significant breach of the containment. Like this? Is that a significant breach of the containment? Actually ejected the reactor cores. This is 2 days before. You ejected the reactor cores because the story's on the 19th. And there's a lot going on here, I know, tonight. And we're 44 minutes in. We're still on the same story. And it's going to be a while before we get through that. They tell so many lies. We try to challenge every lie. Good luck. Unless I'm going to do a 10-hour show a day. I have no hope of ever scraping what happens in 24 hours. So both reactor 1 ejected its fuel pool, reactor 3 ejected its fuel pool. Clearly, when you look at reactor 3, the fuel pools are at the top of the building. There is no top to the building. So therefore, there is no fuel pool. The minute it's exposed to air, it ignites. It detonates if it touches water. Water needs to be added to the spent fuel at the Fukushima since heating by the spent fuel can cause the water to evaporate and boil off, says the chicken neck. These are crazies, eh? Oh, so what all gonna be? Oh, I gotta squint my eyes first. Oh, what all gonna be squawking now? And what I'll take all the. You sick, demented, hateful, disgusting Crazies. Reactor 3 gone. No more. Heating by the spent fuel causes the water to evaporate and boil off. No, well, that's why, like, there's 120,000 liters a day evaporates from the fuel pool. Each liter is a dirty bomb. It's trillions and trillions and trillions and trillions anthropogenic man-made isotopes that attacks everything with replicating cells. There's nothing on the planet with an autoimmune trigger to defend against it. All right? And so when they're out there suggesting, you know, like when they're out there telling you the fuel pool is still intact, the journalist is laughing to kill themselves. They're like, no, just tell them the fuel pool, it's gone, George. In addition, reports from Japan says the spent fuel pool at Reactor 4 is leaking, which further increases the need for adding water. Can't add water at a nuclear meltdown, for goodness sakes. Possible source of the leak in Unit 4 pool may be the seal around the door. Oh, that's a video. Let's play that. That's only 14 seconds. She's going to convince you that she's in the building, 100 and something feet above that stump to your left.
We are here inside Reactor 4 at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear.
So let me do that again. Oh shit, that froze, eh? Oh crap. Well, that's not good. It's gonna be one of those nights, is it? Oh yeah, it's just frozen. Oh man, I could move it over. Just bear with me. I can move it over into the other window if I got to. I'm just hoping that comes to its senses in the next few minutes, but that's a problem. Let's move all the rest of the show over into another window. Okay, we'll do that because, oh, I might get lucky. No, I'm not going to get it. All right, so I'm going to move this over to the other window. We'll get that to work, right? Because I can come in on the other window. Hang on a second. Okay, we can get the other window to work. Oh, well, that's the beauty of having the equipment that I got. You can get around it sometimes. It take me a minute. It's quite concerning, though, when you see that happening. We'll go right to there. See if that works. Might not work. We might just have a... No, it looks like it's going to work. There we are. All right, we'll be back in business in just a moment. I just got to go in and... We're almost ready. Yeah, because... I changed my security just before I went live to try to avoid this stuff. All right. And almost there. My apologies. All right, here we go. Here we go. All right, what I got to do is, oh yeah, almost ready. We'll do that. We change that to this. We change that to that. Okay, we're back in business. Here we are. And so, we already done that one. That's because I moved that video, right? They are located between the pool and the area above the reactor vessel. They are concrete with metal liners and roughly 20 feet by 3 feet. Some interesting stuff here. I mean, a lot of lies, but there's some documentation here that is useful for us. So why do you think they would pretend they're in a building that don't exist? All the media worldwide, universities have participated in that lie. 2013, 2014, and all the way up to now. Why go through that? And these, I got videos of this, and I put this together probably 10 years ago, and I was like, I got them now, and I'm still showing that videos today, and no medias, no blogs have ever regurgitated it. When fuel is moved between the pool and the vessel, hey, well, just a second here. No, it's got nothing to do with potato chips. Anybody tells you like a potato chip or bananas is the industry. That's the only people who would say something like that. See, let me give you an example. Because the problem is I got too much, right? Here we go. So after Chernobyl, which was brutal, but it's like a paper towel compared to Fukushima. You see all the studies on schizophrenia, Down syndrome in Scotland because of Chernobyl. They studied the abortions, congenital abnormalities in Hungary because of Chernobyl, because it's not like banana, it's not like potato chips. Incidents of illegal abortions, congenital abnormalities in Hungary. There's a lot of studies on sex ratio, males to female ratio, on whole countries and continents. Human sex ratio at birth after atmospheric weapons testing, because atmospheric weapons testing contaminated the entire planet, so they expected to see more males than females being born. Prenatal irradiation induced brain, cognitive impairments, and effective radiation on the reproductive systems. Leukemia incidences after iodine-131 exposures. Your eyes can be destroyed. Your dental abnormalities are your teeth are destroyed. The outcome of pregnancy after Chernobyl. A lot of studies in Sweden and other countries. Infant mortalities after Chernobyl. The potential for disease initiation. So people that mentioned bananas and potato chips, very dangerous people. Radioactive fallout, neural tube defects, Chernobyl cover-up. Like, the evidence is everywhere, but the media won't acknowledge it. The academics don't describe it. When you find the studies, you see what they're studying, you realize, holy smokerooey. The influence of post-Chernobyl fallout and birth defects, abortion rates in Austria. Trends in sex odds at birth in Europe. All of Europe, they studied male, female. And by the way, if you got more males than females, you have less babies. This is true for all species, right? Prenatal loss of 400 fetuses in the Czech Republic. Secondary sex ratio trends associated gender-specific births near nuclear disease factories in France and Germany. Non-thyroid cancers. They love to talk about thyroid only, see? But every cancer is applicable because your body attacks the radiation for the rest of your life with white blood cells till it builds a tumor around it. So it depends where the tumor is, right? If it's on the thyroid, then it's a thyroid tumor, right? If it's on the kidney, it's a kidney tumor. If it's on the lung, it's a lung tumor. If it's in the bone, it's a skeleton tumor. And it's in the bones of all the species now, which means everything is producing radioactive stem cells. Congenital abnormality in Belarus. Overall cancer in Finland from Chernobyl. Down syndrome in Belarus. Down syndrome in Scotland. We showed you earlier. So it's not like a banana, is it? Prenatal Norwegian reindeer. The reindeer in Latvia are still too radioactive to be sold for consumption, right? Including their milk. Renewed chain reaction feared at number 4. That's that's an interesting statement, isn't it? Renewed chain reaction at reactor 4. Renewed chain reaction. Renewed chain reaction. So basically acknowledging there's a chain reaction at reactor 4, right? Let's go over to the poll. Did nuclear scientists use nuclear power as an extermination machine against all species on purpose? Well, clearly they did, because if they don't know, who knows? Right? And as I showed you the studies, they know the effects from the radioactive fallout. And then the cover story was meant to, lying is so firmly entrenched in this industry that telling the truth is absolutely unconscionable for them. Electric air pumps are used to inflate the seals between the pool and the reactor. So when you're changing some of the fuel, right? Are used to inflate the seals and keep them inflated as the air leaks out. So they're dependent on external power, not battery or not nuclear plant, right? So if you lose external power, you can't recompress the pumps, the seals. The seals are pumped air, and they don't have a backup system. And you've seen the damage from the tsunami. Well, first off, like when you look at the building, clearly it doesn't look like that, but that is the official building picture. These are both the official pictures. And science doesn't work that way. Science doesn't work that way. Just bear with me. I'm just gonna save myself a bunch of misery later and get rid of. Okay, here we go. These pumps are powered by electricity from the power grid. Same as the reactors are dependent upon the power grid. They can't run themselves. And these are like cities, right? And the amount of energy that they use. Each reactor needs 4,500 tons a minute. Think of 4,500 one-ton pickup trucks with a ton of water in the back of it. That's how much water it needs every minute. So think about the pump you would need to fill up 4,500 one-ton pickup trucks with a ton of water, 240 gallons of water in each pickup truck. 1 million gallons in 4,500 one-ton pickup trucks in each minute, 1,440 minutes a day. So once the power grid in Japan was knocked out, those seals could not be inflated if they lost air. So if these seals lost air, they could lead to significant water loss from the pool, even if there was no direct physical damage to the pool from the earthquake or the tsunami or the explosions. Say, for instance, this may be what happened at Pool 4 and could affect the other pools as well. So as soon as the fuel rod is exposed, boom, right? The zirconium cladding will detonate on you. And this is reactor 4. There is nothing there. There is no seals. There is no fuel pools. And they covered that up. Right from the get-go, they refused to acknowledge. And so in 2013, they released that picture and said that was the top of that building. But the top of that building had already been gutted by that point, right? So this is what's left of reactor 4 in 2013. I can't tell the difference. Can you tell the difference? Even if there was no physical damage to the pool from the earthquake or tsunami, it would lose. Well, like, we saw an example of this in the United States at the Hatch nuclear plant in Georgia in 1986. This reactor is very similar to the boiling water reactors at Fukushima. I'm pretty sure it was an exact replica, wasn't it? In the Hatch case, the line supplying air to the inflatable seal was accidentally closed, and the seal lost pressure, created a leak. And by some time, the problem was identified. Several hours later, 141,000 gallons of water leaked. Using like 141,000 gallons is not a leak. It's the only word they're allowed to use no matter what happens in the nuclear industry. It's unconscionable, isn't it? So just in a few hours, 141,000, which is about half of the water in the pool. So it's either that pool was empty or they had a meltdown and covered it up. Because once the fuel is exposed, it ignites right away. So Fukushima lost its water immediately. So even if, well, that's what happened, right? It lost its water, it melted, the fuel ignited, it dripped down, hit the water, and created the hydrogen and detonated, right? It's crazy, isn't it? And so that's why these bizarre creatures called journalists are pretending they're in a building that don't exist. So that's quite a revelation that it could lose all of its water in just a few hours if it loses pressure. That's insane. It's insane, right? So nuclear scientist writes the story, nuclear journalist, or the journalist prints it, and they make a whole bunch of money for putting out a couple of paragraphs, and nobody has the future because these people exist. About half the water in the pool. That is incredibly important. It's unbelievably important, that facet. The Nuclear Regulatory Commission document goes on to note that if the water levels had gotten low enough to expose the fuel to high radiation levels around the pool would have made it difficult for workers to fix the problem. It looks like there's a few problems trying to fix that. It's quite the revelation, though, to say stuff like that. Pretty sure nobody's shocked, but just let me giggity all of that and put that somewhere where I can find it later. the other pile of disaster that I got there. It'll take me a minute. Oh, not too bad. Like the whole industry is nuts, right? All right, back here, right? The spent fuel pool appears on the right side of the diagram. Like, there's two spent fuel pools at the top of the buildings, and that's them up there. 1, 2 over there, and the reactor core is at the top of the buildings. Now, one was supposed to be just a transfer. So you take it out of the spent fuel, put it in the transfer, or you take it out of the reactor, put it in the transfer pool, let it sit for a while, eventually put it in the other spent fuel pool, and then eventually it would be lowered. This is a 190-foot, 19-story, 65-meter building. So over here is the elevator shaft. It's just a shaft, and it would lower it down with the crane to a special truck that would put it in the so-called dry storage or the common spent fuel pool section. If they're putting it in the spent fuel, then that means it's vented. So it's very huge releases every time you change the fuel in every 14 months. Now, because you don't have a repository in Japan or anywhere else, the spent fuel pools, both of them, are stuffed far beyond capacity. The spent fuel appeared on the right side of the diagram. The reactor vessel and its reactor core appeared on the left side. The refueling platform is used to move the fuel assemblies one at a time between the reactor core and the spent fuel pool through an opening in the spent fuel pool wall, created by the removal of that pressurized gate. So everything stays underwater. And that's the gate. You can see the double gate. Overhead view of the radiated spent fuel bundle is being transferred from the reactor core to the spent fuel pool. Radiation streaming into the atmosphere after number 4 pool boiled dry in a fire. March the 18th. That's the day before they wrote the story that you're reading. And that story is from March the 19th. That's the next day. But on the 18th, it boiled dry. And we know it boiled dry because we have... I put together all 4 sides in a picture of reactor 4. So when you look at reactor 4, there's 4 sides to it. Now when you look at these people, they're pretending they're on top of that building. And then when you look at the top of this here, you can see the 2 fuel pools, which are stuffed to over capacity because they don't have a repository anywhere on the planet. All right. Everybody give themselves a big pat on the back. We just made it through a story on nuclear, a whole story from the original day. Right, so they were telling big lies. It took us an hour and 3 minutes to get through their lies. Yeah, I digressed a little bit, I guess, but because we started off, we talked about Iran and Iraq, right? Quite a bit. 13 minutes or 15 minutes or something. So when you look at all 4 sides, then yeah. So this is the Great Lakes, and you can see it's slaughtered. This is the 3rd biggest aquifer on the entire planet of fresh water. and it's completely saturated with nuclear reprocessing facilities or fuel manufacturing facilities, rather, nuclear dumps and nuclear power plants. And so it's pretty easy to draw a conclusion that for 80 years this industry has attacked the water on the planet. And water is, water is, everybody's in contact with water. Water, everybody perspires into the environment. Everybody hopefully pees into a toilet or something. But everybody's using and excreting water all the time, right? And water, if water has a memory, then water carries all your memories. Because your memories were stored is made of water. It's replenished constantly with water. So water is your memory, right? Water is your life. Without water, you don't exist. Without water, there's no food. Without water, our planet looks like the moon. Without water, there is no life, period. And if we're looking in space for life, we're looking for water first, right? Then we assume there's got to be life there if all the other conditions are met, etc., etc. And so what we see symmetrically throughout the whole planet is this sustained attack upon water with nuclear. They've dumped it into the oceans at a furious rate for decades, particularly the British. What they done was just as creepy as you can be, and they knew what they were doing. They done it because it's so bad. They said that we got no choice. But they did have choices. Once there was a ban on it, they came up with solutions, didn't they? They're not good solutions, but it proves they didn't have to do what they done. And they dumped it on the continental shelves. And there's quite a few countries that done this. Britain was it was vicious. What they done, it was vicious. It was vicious. Why would you destroy the ecosystem? Why would you do something like that? And they knew what they were doing, which is one of the reasons we got the poll tonight, because they absolutely knew. The evidence is unassailable. They knew what they were doing. Did the nuclear scientists use nuclear power as an extermination machine against all species? And what other answer can there be? Absolutely, positively. I mean, the third biggest aquifer on the entire planet, and wrecked that. And they just had a referendum in Kazakhstan, was it? That's the seventh biggest body of fresh water on the entire planet where they're going to put that nuclear power plant, folks. It's a lake. It's a massive lake, which connects over to China too, right? But it's the seventh biggest body of fresh water on the planet. And they're going to put a nuclear plant right on it. There's already been plants there. They're going to put another one there now with that referendum. That was clearly, we covered it. And I still got more documentation to cover on it if I can ever get to it. And then the plumes, they covered the whole planet. This is only 20 days in your top left-hand corner. That's the Xenon 133. Anger greets Kan in Fukushima trip. Anger greets Kan, which was the Prime Minister of Japan at the time, who sold us out. That's April 22nd, 2011. That was 40 days later, right? Japanese Prime Minister faced angry criticism as he visited the area around the damaged Fukushima Daiichi nuclear complex on 30th day on which the plant operator released hard data on the scope of a leak of highly radioactive water from the plant earlier that month. And so that's an incredible lie, because the whole planet was covered in radiation in just 20 days. Of course, the Wall Street Journal, you can count on them. You can count on them to cut your throat, can't you? That's the only thing you can count on with the media, is they're going to cut your throat. You're going to write it down, take it to the bank. You know that's what they're going to do. Japanese nuclear plant operator plagued by scandal. Japanese nuclear plant operator plagued by scandal. This story is is March 23rd, 2011. This is 12 days after the tsunami. This story came out. Fumbling towards Fukushima, Japan nuclear plant operator was plagued by scandals. For years, TEPCO, the operator of the Fukushima Daiichi power plant, had been widely criticized for deadly accidents, improper inspections. The Fukushima disaster is the tragic nadir in the history of poor management of a company's nuclear facilities. All of them. In 2003, the then president of the Tokyo Electric Power Company, or TEPCO, gave a speech addressing what until then had been the biggest scandal in the history of Japan's largest energy utility company. In 29 incidents the year before, the nuclear power plant maintenance document has been falsified, and TEPCO has been forced to take 17 nuclear reactors offline as a result. And TEPCO CEO and 4 other top executives resigned. But the nuclear scientists were still there being evil, right? Getting rid of the executives don't do nothing. Taking incredible packages. They went off golfing for the rest of their life, had a great life. Today, though, those words must ring hollow to the people who have received high levels of radiation following the accidents at the Fukushima Daiichi 1. And to those, it's interesting, who have been evacuated may never be able to return to their homes located near the plant again. This story from November 1st, 2016, about South Korea, if they had a fire in the spent fuel pool. Japan had 4 or 8 spent fuel pools detonate. Were probably bigger than South Korea's. 24 million would be needed to be evacuated, but that would be in Japan and China too, not just South Korea they're talking about. More than 24 million people would have to be evacuated. 5.4 million people, you can see the sentence here, in South Korea. 1.1 million in North Korea, 7.9 million in Japan, and 700,000 in China would need to be evacuated if a spent fuel pool blew up in South Korea. So when you look at the spent fuel pool of reactor 4, reactor 3, reactor 2, or reactor 1, they're all gone. There's 2 fuel pools in each building. They're all gone, clearly. Okay, let's get back to that story from the 23rd of March. The numerous past incidences were in no way isolated mistakes made by individual employees. Instead, they were the result of a corporate culture at TEPCO that allowed hair-raising breaches in safety to occur. As a nuclear scientist said, Fukushima? What Fukushima? So this is 2013, November the 7th, that picture over there. They're claiming they're at the top of this building. 140 feet above it, looking down on the fuel pool, which is at the top of the buildings. And that's physics.com. A huge, huge resource people use worldwide, right? Cutting your throat. Getting it done. Cutting their throat. Nuclear division spins out of control. First, we must admit that we had no clear rules to judge whether equipment was fit for surface. This is a TEPCO stated in the speech, which is still available on TEPCO's website at that time. A culture of monsters, isn't it? After all these years, we've never seen nothing but monsters. Every single story and every single day, over and over and over. He said there was no rules addressing the fact that the machinery and equipment generally wear away or crack with the passage of time. So equipment was used as long as such flaws didn't pose so-called safety hazards. And therein lies the problem. When something was unclear, TEPCO engineers apparently made arbitrary decisions. They repeatedly made personal decisions based on their own idea of safety. Oh, yeah, we're safe. We're Japanese. We're very smart people. Yeah, smart enough to trick the whole world, that's for sure. And you're smart enough to poison the whole world and get away with it so far. What a legacy. Over time, the nuclear division appeared, and I mean, we got trolls that have been trolling me for over a decade from Japan. Imagine how messed up in the head they got to be. Imagine what kind of creature they actually got to be to do something like that. What kind of moron you got to be to do that. What kind of idiot you actually got to be to do that. What kind of dummy. What kind of dipshit you got to be to do that. To refuse to acknowledge, well, they know, but they refuse to cure. Their job is to be evil. That's what they got hired. They're evil, and their boss recognized it, and their job is to stalk me for over a decade straight. Over time, the nuclear division appeared to spin out of control. According to the Katsumata assessment, the engineers were so confident in their knowledge of nuclear power that they came to hold the erroneous belief to not have to report problems to the national government as long as safety was maintained. In the end, they went as far as to delete factual data and falsify inspections and repair records. Delete factual data, falsify inspections and repair records leading up to the Fukushima. And it never stopped, has it? There's nobody on the planet came out and said they're not in the building. Well, that's a lie. There was one person. And they interviewed Dr. Helen Kellegott, the #1 nuclear activist. And she started up Beyond Nuclear. She started up Physicians for Against Nuclear and everything else. What is it, like 26,000 doctors she hoodwinked that are still going strong today? She wrote 14 anti-nuclear books on top of that. And she done hundreds of interviews where she told this lie. But this one she was confronted, rather. I'm going to hopefully adjust the volume properly this time. She was asked, does reactor 4 look like this or does it look like that? Now, that would normally be about 140 feet above the stump here. You can see the guts hanging out of the stump. There is nothing left in these buildings. So I put these two pictures and the extra pictures you'll see showing up on both sides. That square up there is the video. It's a very short one. We're going to play it for you. And she categorically denied the building looked like this. Same as Arnie Gunnarsson, of course. Here we go.
Let me ask you this. You've said that if the spent fuel pool in number 4 collapses, that you would evacuate your family from Boston. Do you think we would ever know the truth of what's going on there? And the reason I ask is because we've seen coverage in the national news media here in the United States from ABC News and others that take video cameras in, saying that they're being given exclusive access to number 4 in the removal of the fuel rods, which is said to have begun. And what we see in the video being shared here in America is a pristine interior building. It doesn't look like a building in which the top blew off in a hydrogen explosion.
The Japanese are very tidy people, and they have, by robot control and by human beings, removed the debris from the top of Building 4, and it does look pristine.
But it can't. It looks like that, see? And she's done interviews all over the country where... Let me just play one more video, a shorter one. Now I put the picture, this was a Talking Stick TV, she done the interview, this particular one, but she's done it several hundred times, where she talks about the reactors. Now remember, she's got 14 anti-nuclear books out there. She's made millions and millions and millions and millions. She was nominated for a Nobel Prize, I believe, wasn't she? And she's going to convince you, she doesn't say anything for reactor 4, she's going to try to convince you that it's all okay.
And especially Building 3 is very fragile. It's still got a huge cooling pool on its roof, protected by nothing. The molten core has melted its way down onto the concrete of the containment vessel, but maybe into the earth. And if that collapsed, there would be a nuclear inferno.
So how was it she never seen the explosion, I wonder? I might as well play Reactor 4 version. She's done this hundreds of times.
Building 4 is also similarly fragile, and it's got a huge cooling pool on top with all its fuel rods, but they have been removing them. And it's been a very delicate procedure, and they've removed almost all. So if that collapsed now, I think it would probably be okay.
So the building doesn't exist. They faked it, right? They pretend they were... I mean, how much evidence do you need? Because I'll go get it for you. It's dear. I know where it's to. If you're still not convinced, well, maybe you should leave Mommy's computer alone before her boyfriend catches you and kicks the shit out of you. He also attributed another dangerous trait to the engineers. The high degree of technical specialization required in nuclear power generation, he warned, had hampered flexible personnel changes in the nuclear power division. Hampered. No, the good old boys club. They hired their little inbreed to cover up their legacy of deceit and dishonesty. Exclusive circle of engineers who defied checks by other divisions, including the management. Exclusive circle of engineers, the inbreeds of the inbreeds on top of it. The 2004 manuscript is only one testament to the nuclear power joint's troubled approach to crisis management. Both before and after the speech, an impressive list of incidents continue to grow, including deadly accidents. During 1980s and 90s, in several incidences, TEPCO falsified data in voluntary inspections, including a number of cracks in the reactor pressure vessels. Like lies. It's something else in it, this industry. In 1991 and 1992, the safety vessels of Reactor 1 and 3 at the Fukushima plant, which had gone online in 1971, was tested for leaks. According to TEPCO, workers pumped air into the safety vessel to reduce the rate of leaks. Uh, 1991, 1992, folks. In 2000, a reactor at Fukushima plant had to be shut down because of a hole in the fuel rod. And similar incidents had already occurred in 1997 and 1994, in which radiation was released. And where was the International Atomic Energy Agency while all this was going on? They were telling you it was like a banana and a potato chip and walking in the sunshine. Similar incidences had already occurred in 1997. In 2002, cracks in water pipes were discovered at the nuclear power plant. So this came out 12 days after the tsunami, this story. It's a really important story. In 2002, an engineer with the U.S. firm General Electric, which manufactured 3 of the 6 reactors at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant, also raised alarm bells. Inspections had not been carried out at a total of 13 reactors at TEPCO power plants. He showed the Japanese nuclear regulatory authorities 29 incidences of falsified data and cover-ups, a development that led to resignation in 2002 of top TEPCO executives. Physics.org, Fukushima plant ready for delicate fuel rod removal. November 7, 2013. They claiming, all the media done this. We got it, we documented it, we talked about it. You can find it in our playlist. But the building actually looked like that, and they just put a cover over it. They built off-site and then reassembled it, and then claimed worldwide in the medias and universities that it looked like that. Are we supposed to have a future when the institutions that we're force-fed every day hate us? They hate us and the species. They hate us. In 2006, radioactive steam leaked from a pipe at the Fukushima plant. Every time I heard the word leak, I just want to kick a nuclear scientist in the testicles, eh? The company was also accused the same year of falsifying data about coolant water temperatures in 1985, 1988. The data had been used for mandatory inspections at the plant in 2005. 2007, further falsified reactor data from TEPCO emerged. Very important story tonight, actually. In 2007, at least 8 people died when the reactor in Noto Peninsula that they're talking about right there, nuclear power plant, was badly damaged in an earthquake. That earthquake, the Noto earthquake, in January the 1st, was 6,700 homes and businesses around that site were destroyed through liquefaction, right, in the earthquake. That plant's been closed since they closed all the plants after Fukushima. Pipes burst, fires broke out, radioactive water leaked from a spent fuel pool. Nobody really knows what's going on because this industry has never been held accountable. There is no checks and balances. Every time you hear the word leak, you should have nothing but contempt for these people, these creatures. TEPCO had to decontaminate defective buildings. You can't decontaminate a building when it's radioactive. How are you going to do it? If you grind it all off, you're just spreading it everywhere else. You can't get rid of it. The nuclear power plant, because of the gamma shines, the neutron bombardments, the beta rays, not just the physical atoms, the energy is embedded and blued into the material itself. The nuclear power plant, and so it is 95% of a nuclear site. That's why it's not recyclable. It's because of the perpetual neutron bombardment. Everything is giving off energy. The whole thing is a fable for nuclear weapons that you can't use, but it looks like we might in 2 weeks. The nuclear power plant remained closed for 1 year for earthquake safety, which has allegedly already been good enough, could be improved. Later it was determined that TEPCO had missed 117 inspections at the site. You can't keep up with this. The whole industry is one great big criminal organization, but on the level of danger, we don't have anything else to equate it to. They're worse than all the biological weapons facilities on the planet combined at a single site. They're hemorrhaging radiation from the fuel pools at 1,000 fuel pools worldwide. And then when you talk about all the dumping they've done, that's all hemorrhaging radiation, splitting atoms. Material that is continuously splitting atoms. That never stops. How are you going to defeat that monster? On March 2nd, 2011, just days before the start of the current earthquake catastrophe, Japan's nuclear regulators lobbed accusations of mass negligence against TEPCO. It alleged TEPCO had failed to inspect 33 pieces of equipment at Fukushima Daiichi plant, one of the sites of the current catastrophes, including central cooling system elements in the 6 reactors, every one of them, and the spent fuel pools, and hasn't been inspected according to regulations. And the company has since admitted to having made the errors. So, Fukushima was in disrepairs when it melted down on top of that. And it's on an earthquake fault lines where you get 1,000 earthquakes a year. It's less than 50 miles from tectonic plates. And there's a 3,000-year legacy of tsunamis up to 300 feet high. Why would you build it there? And then still not even do the maintenance? You're disgusting. It's disgusting. At the same time, TEPCO also reported to the nuclear regulatory authorities and not only failed to do the 33 inspections at the Fukushima Daiichi plant, but also 19 further inspections at nearby Fukushima Daini plant, which they admit is never going to be reopened. But they also admit that they had huge amounts of radioactive water on that site. Where'd that come from? Some experts had already been warning since 1970s the Mark I, which was an identical site to Fukushima. It was 10 kilometers up the coastline, south of it. Some experts have already been warned since the 1970s that the Mark I reactor type produced by the U.S. manufacturers General Electric is also called the Fukushima design was not constructed to survive a combination of earthquake and tsunami. Well, nothing is designed to survive these types of earthquakes and tsunamis. Tsunami hits at 600 miles per hour. You can build all the walls you want, you're not going to stop it. Only days after the earthquake, 2 engineers who helped build the plant confirmed at a press conference The serious construction errors have been made. Many backup systems for emergency have not been built at the plant. Wow. Figures, eh? You built it on a fault line right alongside of tectonic plates with a 3,000-year legacy of tsunamis, and you didn't even have the basic standards. And International Energy the IAEA gave you a pass on all of this too? Because that's the only way you're getting away with it. Many backup systems for emergencies have not been built at the plants. Really, 40 years later, you still hadn't built them. There's another 100 reasons to hate this industry today. Looking at the situation today, statements just 12 days after Fukushima tsunami. Looking at the situation today, statements made by TEPCO spokesman in March 2004 seems bitterly ironic. He pledges that TEPCO has learned numerous valuable lessons from the 2002 scandal. One of the most important was the information should always be shared. TEPCO appeared to have reported to the Japanese government only those things it was unable to keep secret. So anything it couldn't keep secret, that is reported. It was only when the shell of one of the reactor buildings exploded live on television, which was the reactor. When it wasn't the shell, it was the fuel pool. And I really disrespect the author of this story for suggesting that it was a shell. On March the 12th, that the world became aware of the true extent of the accident. No, they're still not aware of the true extent, are they? August the 15th came out from the University of California, San Diego, that 400 billion neutrons released per square meter surface of spent fuel between March the 13th and the 20th. It was a lot more than that. I wish that's all it was. Lying is just natural. Everything is scripted, right? Because they got to get it right every single time to keep the other lies, to work with all the other lies they tell. As a result, 5 days after the tsunami, Japan Prime Minister Nato Kan himself visited executives at the TEPCO's headquarters and shouted at flabbergasted engineers, "What is going on here?" Reportedly accused the TEPCO officials of placing the well-being of their own company above that of the Japanese people. Oh, it's way worse than that. The engineers reportedly considered pumping ocean water mixed with boric acid into the damaged reactor 1 as early as the morning of March the 12th to prevent a threatening total core meltdown. They use a special, water, and basically, it's a heavy water, and it's full of boric acid to stop the elements from causing a unwanted criticality event, chain reaction. And remember, it balls off 120,000 liters into the local farmlands because everything is surrounded by farms. All nuclear plants and dumps are surrounded by farms. When you look, this is one of their pictures from that story. Right, reactor 3, reactor 4. Clearly, these were 19-story, 190 feet, 65-meter buildings. Clearly, they're gone. Black smoke rises over reactor 3. So instead of saying reactor 3 is detonated, they say black smoke rises over reactor 3. Surreal people, aren't they? They look like people. We've never seen any attributes that suggest they really are people. This disaster is 60% man-made. They failed in their initial response. Well, you can't do nothing at a nuclear meltdown. A man is screened at an evacuation center for the leaked radiation from the damaged Fukushima nuclear facilities. He's screened. Just hang on a second. I got it. There we go. The whole story is just insane. The whole story's insane, isn't it? Oh, that's not where I want it to be. What the hell have I got done? Just humor me for a second. I must have copied everything over. Yeah, I copied everything over. And it's crazy. I got no idea how I done that. I guess okay. I gotta be careful I don't lose everything, so just bear with me. Because I had to bring everything over to a new pane. A new pane in my earth. I'm almost there though. Well, that's a bit scary that happened. Okay, we're back to here. So TEPCO manager bows during a press conference in Tokyo March the 12th, the day after the tsunami. The tsunami and the resulting explosion caused serious damage to the Fukushima power plant. Serious damage. So the cover story is really is something, isn't it? Like, must be so nice to be. I don't understand. Like, well, son, once you go to university, look at this story right here. I killed 13 Palestinian kids today. Killed 13 Palestinian kids today. There's a lot of evil people on our planet, isn't it? I just got to fix all that stuff that I accidentally moved, so I'm almost finished here now. I'm just a little shocked that I done that, because that causes me certain grief here. Almost there. Boy, am I silly. Okay, let me delete that section. So at least I got something I can work with. Because I'm at around 3,700. Now I'm at 2,700, so it's better. This will work. Okay. It don't matter. So, long story short is, we don't know what Israel and Iran is going to do or when they're going to do it, but it looks like it is going to happen. Looks like a nuclear war is creeping around the corner. That'll certainly help in covering up what Fukushima has done to the planet, and the Japanese people are responsible for an extinction event. So it's a win-win scenario for these people, isn't it? It's a win-win for those people. All you gotta do is be evil and you win. I have to figure all this out for the next show. We're gonna call her tonight, I guess, at the rate I'm seeing. So the pro-nuclear, just they must single them out. They must have a psychologist at every university, the nuclear industry, looking for psychopaths or autistic kids, right, that are functional or almost functional. And then they just put them to work on these things. And there's nothing they won't do because they're just... isn't that what we're seeing? The people... It doesn't make any sense unless you think of them as kids went to university with autism, were functional, were taken then and manipulated by the nuclear industry, were given everything on a golden platter because they knew that they would carry out evil right to the letter because they were incapable of not. Does that make sense? Because apparently that's exactly what happened, isn't it? We got brutalized in our show yesterday. We got no views. I've never seen that before. We got none tonight. We got 14 viewers on the show. Censorship is like overdrive. Did nuclear scientists use nuclear power as an extermination machine against all species on purpose? Yeah, sure they did. That's guaranteed on Namando. My goodness. All right, thank you, everybody. Hugs for everybody. I hope you had a great day. Extra hugs for James Lou said he donated $200 last night. That's a big deal. We've been defunded for quite a while now, and it's very difficult to keep the whole show working. Links are below in the description, bottom of the description. You can also give some thumbs up or something. Everything helps, right? So everything you can do helps. If you can't donate, at least try to give us a thumbs up. Or email us out to some medias, not medias, but bloggers. If you do that once a week or 5 times a week, and you got 100 people doing that, we will change the game. And we're going to play one of James's songs, Calm Down Charlie, which was named after a stalker. We used to call him Calm Down Charlie because he was always freaking out. And James put out quite a great song on that. We're going to play that as the closing song for the night. We'll see everybody on Sunday unless there's a major event. Or I get bored. You never know. It's hard for me not to do shows every day, but it wears you out too, right? That's okay. We'll see everybody on the next show. You have a great night, great weekend, everybody. Hugs for everybody.
In the Tokyo Bureau, swirling smoke and neon beams, Chicago division fueled by heated dreams. Calm down, Charlie calls in, voice smooth as silk. Says, Dana, you're dreaming, don't cry over spilt milk. On Dana Durnford show, the chatter's turning wild, but Charlie shoots it down with that cool cat style. Unit 3's no killer, no harm to see life. He chuckles in the static, cuts through the strife. Oh, calm down, Charlie, with his nuclear charm. He says starfish are just fine, there's no alarm. His words dance on airwaves with a confident glow. Calm down, Charlie steals the whole radio show. With a snap and a grin, Charlie's voice so clear scatters the dread, dispels all the fear. Mux didn't hurt, he croons with a sigh. Science is for thinkers, not a whim or lie. Though Dana and the crowd may shout and roar, Charlie's unfazed, he's heard it all before. His swinging rationale, like a soothing song, says, hold on to logic, we gotta stay strong. Oh, calm down, Charlie, with his nuclear charm. He says starfish are just fine, there's no alarm. His words dance on airwaves with a confident glow. Calm down, Charlie steals the whole radio show.